My parents sent a group message. We think it's best you step away for now. Revenge story. I still vividly remember that afternoon. I had just finished a client meeting and stepped out of the sleek glass building in downtown Boston when my phone buzzed. A familiar ping from the family WhatsApp group. But instead of the usual weekend vacation photos or news about a new golf game, the screen displayed a single curt message. We think it's best you step away for now. 7 short words, yet they cut through me like a cold, sharp blade. I'm Rachel Anderson, 32 years old. In Boston's financial circles, my name was supposed to be synonymous with success, resilience, and numbers that turned into profits. But in my own family, the place where I poured my youth and intellect, my name was tied to one phrase: not good enough, not old enough, not experienced enough, not family enough. Ironic, isn't it? A woman managing over $300 million in client assets was dismissed as a child who only knew theory. I stared at the message, my mind reeling. Step away for now. A polite way to mask the truth. They wanted to push me out of the family company, out of the joint investment fund, out of everything I'd helped build. To rub salt in the wound, my Aunt Patricia quickly dropped a thumbs-up emoji. Classic Patricia, always siding with the majority as long as she didn't have to take responsibility. I could almost hear her voice echoing in my head. Rachel should take a break. Women who are too ambitious cause trouble. I wanted to laugh, but the laugh caught in my throat, turning into an eerie silence. For a few seconds, I debated reacting immediately. Part of me, the part still craving validation, wanted to call my father and demand, "What did I do wrong? Why are you treating me like this?" But reason kicked in. I knew that if I called, I'd only hear the same old lines. "Don't be so sensitive, it's just a temporary strategy." Or worse, a lecture about not respecting family tradition. I was done with that tired script. Instead, I set my bag down on the sidewalk and typed words I never thought I'd say. Understood. I'll respect that decision, and I'll also withdraw my capital from the family fund. I hit send. At that moment, a gust of wind swept through, scattering golden leaves around me. It was as if the universe itself was underscoring that a new chapter had begun. Let me explain. The Anderson family has a joint investment fund where every member contributes money and shares the profits. It sounds democratic, but everyone knows the truth. No one contributed more than I did. Nearly 35% of the fund's capital was mine, painstakingly accumulated over 8 years of relentless work. Yet, with a single message, they wanted to oust me while keeping my money. They thought I'd quietly comply, continuing to fuel the family legacy without a voice in it. In their eyes, I was just a talking ATM, a tool for their wealth. Withdrawing my capital wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the culmination of 1,000 small cuts over the years. Meetings where I was interrupted mid-sentence, detailed analyses I spent months preparing, only to be mocked as too theoretical. Nods of approval for my cousin Jake when he parroted my ideas 3 weeks after I'd presented them. All of it had built into a ticking time bomb in my chest. That afternoon, their message was the detonator. When I hit send, a strange sensation washed over me, part fear, part liberation. It was like jumping off a sinking ship, unsure where I'd swim, but certain I wouldn't drown with those who thought they could dictate my fate. My phone immediately buzzed nonstop. Dad, Uncle Richard, Jake flashed on the screen, but I let it ring. I knew they weren't calling out of concern for me. They were panicking because my withdrawal would cripple the family's financial system. I looked up at the gray Boston sky, thick with the smell of exhaust. The city was still loud, still bustling, but inside me, a strange silence took hold. Someone once said that the moment you dare say no is the moment you find freedom. I didn't yet know where this freedom would lead, maybe a legal battle, maybe a permanent break from my family, but at least it gave me the feeling of owning myself for the first time. I took a deep breath, letting the autumn air fill my lungs. A thought sparked in my mind. If they underestimate my worth, it's time I show them just how powerful I can be. And I want to ask you, those listening to this story, have you ever been in a situation like mine? Betrayed by the people you love most, Dismissed simply because you don't fit their mold? If you have, leave a sign to let me know you're out there. Because trust me, we're not alone in this pain. That night, back at my small brownstone in Back Bay, I sat alone in the dark, letting my phone ring incessantly. No one knew that inside this house I'd already paved a different path, one they'd never suspect. A path that began with that fateful message. In Boston, people whisper about Anderson Financial Advisors as if it's a symbol of wealth and power. Founded by my grandfather after World War II in a modest Tremont Street office, it grew into a prestigious financial firm across New England. 3 generations, 3 distinct styles, but one shared ambition: to keep the Anderson name at the top. My father, Robert Anderson, inherited the business like a seasoned general on a flag-strewn battlefield. He didn't need to win every fight, just ensure people bowed in awe. My mother, Diana, was the epitome of the perfect lady. Poised at cocktail parties in a fitted Chanel dress, her smile timed impeccably, her apple pie dubbed the catalyst for million-dollar deals. Our family owned a 5-bedroom colonial mansion in Brookline, its walls adorned with art, its living room filled with imported wood furniture, and a wine cellar that left every guest gasping in admiration. Senators, judges, and tycoons all passed through that house. A framed photo of my father shaking hands with a smiling senator graced the cover of Boston Business Weekly, hung prominently in the living room as a silent reminder: this is our world. Outsiders envied us, but they didn't know that behind those polished wooden doors, I, the only daughter of Robert, was just a superfluous shadow. I still remember my early school years. While classmates obsessed over jump ropes or dolls, I was fixated on the financial newspapers my father left on the breakfast table. I loved sketching graphs with pencils, tracking stock prices like a secret game of my own. At 10, I asked him a question I still recall. "Dad, why does the Dow Jones rise while bond prices fall?" He looked up from his paper, paused, then chuckled dismissively. "Little girl, talking like you're in a quiz show. Just learn to be charming. Don't turn into a walking textbook." That response slammed a door shut. From that day, I knew my intellect wasn't something my family wanted to see. My childhood was a series of unnamed tests: how to be smart enough but not too stand out, sharp enough but not threatening to men. My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, would repeat like a mantra at every family gathering: "Rachel, it's fine to be smart, but don't let people think you're trying to outshine men. Men don't like women who make them feel inferior." I'd smile and say, "Yes, Aunt Patricia." But inside I thought, if men feel inferior because a woman can do math, they're the ones who should be ashamed. When I graduated top of my finance class at Wharton, my friends and professors showered me with praise. But at the family celebration, my father stood to speak. "Rachel's achievement is commendable, but she still has much to learn from Jake, who's gained real-world experience at the company." I glanced at my cousin Jake, barely scraping by at a mid-tier state school, raising his glass smugly. His real-world experience was 7 months sitting in an office before me. But in my father's eyes, those 7 months made him a master of reality. I sat there, amid polite applause, wondering, are all my achievements, no matter how brilliant, just a joke to them? To the outside world, my family basked in the glow of fame and fortune, but within, every conversation was tinged with injustice and bias. My father believed the Anderson blood ran thicker in male veins. Aunt Patricia dismissed everything I did unless she could claim it as her own idea to boast about at board meetings. Even my mother, loving in her own way, would whisper, "Sweetheart, sometimes wisdom means stepping back. Don't make your father or uncles feel threatened. Let the men think they're in charge." Step back? I wondered. Step back until when? Until I vanish completely in the shadow of men far less capable just because they're the right gender? I often mocked my own fate. Outsiders thought I was the Anderson princess, chauffeured in limousines, attending lavish galas, dining with the elite. But in reality, I was like a decorative centerpiece at a banquet, shiny enough to set the mood, but no one valued my true worth. Once, at a fundraising gala, an elderly senator struck up a conversation with me. I eagerly shared ideas about green investments I was researching. He nodded, but minutes later, I overheard him pitching those same ideas to my father, as if they were his own sudden inspiration. My father laughed heartily, clapped the senator's shoulder, and shot me a look that said, "See? You're just a supporting act." People often asked why I stayed at the company, why I didn't leave to build my own career. Honestly, sometimes I wasn't sure myself. Maybe I clung to a faint hope that one day they'd see me for who I was. Maybe I wanted to prove I wasn't just good on paper, but could carry Anderson Financial further than my father ever dreamed. But deep down, I knew the name Rachel Anderson would never be respected in the house that bore the Anderson name unless I did something extraordinary, undeniable. And that was the tragedy. I belonged to this family, yet it rejected me. I created value, yet was seen as a burden. I was raised to believe family was the safest place, but in reality, it was the fiercest battlefield. At times, I felt like I was living two parallel lives. One was Rachel, the brilliant financial advisor, sought after by clients, respected by the market. The other was Rachel, the immature daughter, in my father's and aunt's eyes, forever dismissed no matter her achievements. That contradiction became a smoldering fire, waiting for a single spark to ignite. And that spark, as you know, was the fateful Friday message. They thought they could push me out of the game with a few words while still using my money to fuel the fund. They had no idea that after years of being underestimated, I'd prepared a plan no one saw coming. But to understand how I could do that, you need to know another secret, one even my family never suspected. Jake was never brilliant. I say this not out of spite but as plain fact. He barely graduated from a state university, while I left Wharton with a prestigious degree and a resume stacked with academic awards. Yet in the family company, Jake was hailed as the true heir, while I was the sidekick who needed babysitting. I still remember my first official meeting at the company at 24, clutching a 100-page market analysis I'd spent months preparing. I was nervous but confident, knowing the data was rock solid. My father introduced me to the board with a single line. "This is Rachel, my daughter. She'll be working under Jake's guidance." Under Jake's guidance. My cousin, who'd been in the company for a mere 7 months. I forced a smile as Jake leaned back in his chair, arms crossed like a general. In his eyes, I saw the smug satisfaction of someone who won not by merit, but by the name on his birth certificate. Subsequent meetings only reinforced the injustice. I passionately presented strategies to expand our portfolio into emerging tech companies, backed by global trends and detailed reports. Before I could finish, Uncle Richard cut me off. "That's enough, Rachel. Let's hear what Jake thinks." Jake cleared his throat, glanced at my report, and parroted my ideas in a dumbed-down version. "Well, tech's hot right now. We should probably look into it." The room nodded as if he'd invented electricity. My father even clapped Jake's shoulder, laughing. "See, this kid's practical, not lost in theory like some girls." I swallowed hard, my hands clenching until my nails dug into my palms. They say silence is golden, but for me, it was a shackle locking away my worth. My mother, Diana, had her own way of extinguishing any spark of rebellion in me. She wasn't harsh like my father or sarcastic like Patricia. She chose sweet words like slow-dripping sedatives. One evening, after I stormed out of a meeting where my work was stolen, she pulled me aside, hand on my shoulder. "Sweetheart, I know you're smart, but sometimes being too smart isn't good. Men don't like women who make them feel inferior. Let your father and uncles decide, and you just support. That's wisdom." Wisdom, in her dictionary, meant stepping aside for less capable men with more privilege. I wanted to laugh bitterly, My entire life's effort was apparently only worth a supporting role in a family drama directed by men. Yet, I can't deny one thing. Their dismissal forged my resilience. I learned to stay silent when sidelined, but I remembered everything. I knew one day I'd need that evidence to turn the tables. Take the quarterly meeting when I was 28. I presented a plan called Diversify into Renewable Energy, outlining portfolio expansion into renewables. Immediately, Patricia grimaced. Rachel, it sounds nice, but no one here wants to throw money at windmills. The room erupted in laughter. I forced a smile and packed away my slides. 3 months later, Patricia boldly declared, We should consider clean energy. I see the future there. No one mentioned me. No one recalled my plan. I sat silently, sipping water, the bitter taste creeping down my throat. Perhaps the most galling part wasn't being sidelined. It was watching my work become someone else's trophy. Jake did it repeatedly. Risk analysis models I built were copied almost verbatim, with a few terms removed to sound more practical. The board praised him as a young talent. Each time, I felt smaller in the very company I'd helped build. I became the woman behind the curtain, even though I'd set up the stage. Some nights, I wondered, why don't I leave? I could easily find a firm that valued my intellect, but then I'd remember my grandfather's eyes, the man who founded Anderson Financial. He once told me, Rachel, you have a mind I've never seen in my lifetime. One day you'll take Anderson to new heights. Don't let anyone tell you you're not enough. That memory kept me there despite the years of injustice. Truthfully, I think my father knew I outshone Jake, but he ignored it deliberately. Acknowledging me meant admitting a woman was the one carrying the company, a humiliation to his sense of tradition. Once, after a tense meeting, I followed him into the hallway and asked directly, Dad, why don't you ever trust me? He stopped, looked at me, his eyes cold. It's not about trust, Rachel. You don't understand family culture. Anderson was built by men and will be continued by men. Those words were a death sentence to my ambitions. But what they didn't know was that during all those years in the shadows, I'd quietly built my own empire. I opened personal investments, partnered with tech startups, and slowly amassed an independent fortune. I prepared in silence, like a miner patiently digging, waiting for the day I'd strike gold. If they thought I'd always bow my head, they were wrong. Their piled-up injustices shaped me into who I am today. Someone ready to hit withdraw with a single message, no matter how much it shook the family. They sowed disdain. I reaped resolve. They sowed darkness. I learned to create my own light. But I must admit, deep down, the pain lingered. The pain of a daughter craving her father's approval, hoping her mother would stand by her, yet never receiving it. That pain didn't vanish. It turned into fuel, and sometimes into bitter irony. Now you understand why I ran out of patience. That Friday message was just the final drop in a cup filled with years of dismissal. And trust me, once the cup shatters, there's no piecing it back together. Some secrets are kept not out of fear, but to wait for the day they're revealed, stunning everyone. My secret, the one the entire Anderson clan never suspected, was the ace that changed the game. From a young age, I learned that speaking my truth in this house was never valued. If you've seen my video about my childhood, you'll recall the times my ideas were brushed off, only for Jake to repeat them later and be hailed as a genius. If you haven't, check my previous videos to see why I had to master a crucial skill, staying silent when necessary. But silence didn't mean powerlessness, it was a mask for a long-term plan. At 25, after nearly a year of being relegated to Jake's assistant, someone who couldn't even distinguish EBITDA from net profit, I decided to open my own door. Unknown to my family, I started investing my modest savings in tech startups in Cambridge and New York. While they spent hundreds of thousands on Hamptons vacations or luxury cars, I funneled my money into fledgling teams meeting in cramped studio apartments. They called me the odd finance girl, but I saw in their eyes what my family lacked, a genuine hunger to create value. Slowly, those quiet investments paid off. Some companies failed, of course, but others became tech unicorns. I learned that while my family clung to outdated methods and long-standing prestige, the world outside was moving at a pace that waited for no one, and I wasn't about to be left behind. But investing was only part of the secret. I spent evenings and weekends coding, building risk calculation models that became patented under my name. If you want to know how obsessed I was with numbers, check my video, How I Stumped My Father at 10 with a Dow Jones question. It'll show you this was just a natural extension of a kid who loved stock tickers more than dolls. From that passion, I developed algorithms to predict market volatility, tools that even major New York funds have offered to buy. But I haven't sold them. I know these cards are too valuable to play early. By 30, my personal wealth exceeded $17 million. I bought a brownstone in Back Bay, registered under an anonymous LLC to avoid detection. I hired a small team, all bound by strict NDAs. We worked in a discreet office within that house, equipped with tech far superior to anything at Anderson Financial. To the outside world, especially my family, I maintained a modest facade, driving a decade-old sedan, wearing affordable suits, steering clear of anything that might raise suspicion. They looked at me and thought, that girl lives frugally. She must not earn much. I smiled inwardly. If you knew the number in my account, you'd faint on the spot. Have you ever felt the thrill of knowing you're far stronger than others think, yet choosing to play weak? It's both painful and exhilarating. Painful because you endure the dismissive looks of your own parents. Exhilarating because you know that one day, when the truth comes out, they'll have no defense. My mother, seeing my old car, would whisper, "Sweetheart, you should take after your sister. Dress up, look the part, find a good husband. Clinging to dry numbers won't give you security." I just smiled. I had security, myself. If you're curious about my sister and why my mother always compared us, check my earlier videos. Aunt Patricia saw me as the idle, dreamy niece. If she knew I held patents coveted by Wall Street, she wouldn't have smirked every time I spoke in meetings. And Jake, oh Jake. My cousin was confident he'd inherit the company, unaware that with a snap of my fingers I could take major clients with me. But I hadn't snapped yet. I was waiting for the right moment like a cat stalking its prey, patient and precise. I share these secrets only with you, those following my story. My family had no clue. They still thought I was the theoretical smart girl, lacking practicality, someone they could kick out of the group chat with a single message. It'll be quite a show when they realize the one they thought they could discard was the one controlling the family's financial fate. I didn't hide my secret out of cowardice. I hid it because I understood one thing. True power doesn't need to be flaunted early. It needs to strike at the right moment. As Warren Buffett said, you only find out who is swimming naked when the tide goes out. When the tide recedes, my family will see who's wearing the life vest. And I, Rachel Anderson, have prepared a life vest, a rescue boat, and even my own navy. Reflecting on those years in the shadows, I'm no longer as angry as I once was. Instead, I'm grateful. Their disdain forced me to build my own world, a foundation they can't touch. But I also know this secret can't stay hidden forever. One day soon, I'll have to reveal it, and when I do, Anderson Financial will never be the same. I walked into the boardroom on the top floor of the company's downtown Boston headquarters, clutching a 200-page report. The polished wood table and lingering coffee scent made my chest tighten. Around me, the family was already seated. My father at the head, Uncle Richard to his right, Aunt Patricia crossing her legs in the corner, and of course, Jake, my cousin, lounging as if the room was his personal stage. I knew today would be tough, but I didn't expect it to be the final straw. I began my presentation. Last quarter, the experimental portfolio using my new investment strategy yielded a 14% return, I said, keeping my voice steady but unable to hide my pride. I projected a slide showing a growth chart, the green lines surging like a wave, far outpacing the market benchmark. I caught a few surprised glances around the table. They couldn't deny the numbers, 14% in one quarter, while the industry struggled to hit 2-3%. But instead of listening, my father leaned forward, tapping his fingers rhythmically, a familiar sign of impatience. Rachel, this is all complex theory. Our clients trust the Anderson name for stability, not risky experiments. I took a deep breath, suppressing my frustration. Dad, this isn't theory. These are real results from the Westfield portfolio you approved last quarter. The room fell silent for a moment. I thought I had a chance to turn things around. But then Uncle Richard smirked. Rachel, no matter how smart you are, don't forget, in business, simplicity is sustainable. Rich clients don't want to hear convoluted terms. Aunt Patricia nodded eagerly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Exactly. You talk too much, all charts and graphs. It's exhausting. Clients want reassurance, not formulas. I knew what they were doing. They couldn't argue with the numbers, so they attacked my delivery, turning my intellect into a burden rather than an asset. Before I could respond, Jake, who'd been fiddling with his phone, looked up with a confident grin. Actually, I have a simpler idea for the big client's portfolio. No need to overcomplicate things. We can go back to the traditional model with slight tweaks, safer that way. I recognized his tweaks instantly, a bastardized version of the strategy I'd outlined in last year's plan. He'd stripped out the core elements that made it successful, keeping only the easy tautogest frame. The room lit up. My father beamed. Yes, that's what Anderson needs. Practical, straightforward, no fluff. Good job, Jake. I stood frozen, my heartbeat pounding like a hammer. I'd just presented a 14% return, but it vanished because Jake regurgitated my old idea in a few vague sentences. I wanted to scream. I wanted to point at them and yell, "Are you blind or just pretending to be?" But I knew my anger would only reinforce their stereotype. Women are emotional, impulsive, unfit to lead, so I swallowed my rage, biting my lip until I tasted blood. The meeting continued as if I'd never spoken. Jake rambled about his safe strategy. My father nodded. Uncle Richard chimed in with praise. I sat silently, each minute piercing my skin like needles. When the meeting ended, I gathered my papers and walked into the empty hallway. The cold neon lights cast my shadow long and thin, meaningless. I was about to head to the elevator when I overheard Aunt Patricia's voice from the break room. That girl's getting dangerous, she whispered to Uncle Richard. If we don't rein her in, she'll surpass Jake. I froze. Not out of shock. I knew they saw me as a threat. But because of the blunt, naked malice in her tone, she no longer saw me as a niece, but an enemy to eliminate. Don't worry, Richard replied. Robert will never let her take the lead. At most, she'll do grunt work in the background. Their soft laughter was colder than any insult. I stood there, my hands crushing the papers I held. A chill ran down my spine. In that moment I realized all my patience, all my hopes for recognition, were futile. They didn't want me to succeed. They wanted me to fail, to prop up their own positions. I stepped out of the building, breathing deeply in the cooling Boston air. The city was still vibrant, its lights dazzling, but inside me, a door had closed. I knew I was no longer on the same side as them. They say betrayal only hurts when it comes from those you trust. I once believed, despite the unfairness, that my father at least wanted the best for me. But after that meeting, I knew he was among those who wanted to rein me in. It wasn't just injustice anymore. It was betrayal. And betrayal has only one outcome: confrontation. That night, alone in my secret brownstone office, I stared at the spreadsheets and contracts I'd quietly signed with private clients. For the first time, I felt no guilt thinking about leaving Anderson Financial. I returned to my Back Bay brownstone after the quarterly meeting, my head still buzzing with Patricia's mocking laughter and my father's smug nods. I tossed the crumpled report onto my desk and sank into my chair, staring at the computer screen. For 8 years, I'd endured, stayed patient, waited. I thought if I held on long enough, the numbers would speak for me. But today, a 14% return wasn't proof. It was a joke they dismissed in a heartbeat. It was time for the numbers to speak in a way they couldn't ignore. I opened my browser and navigated to the bank's portal. The security layers popped up, steps I'd done hundreds of times as a co-administrator of the Anderson Family Fund. But tonight, I wasn't logging in to monitor portfolios or approve Jake's transactions. I was here to do something no one in the family had ever dared consider. Username, password, OTP sent to my phone. Each step felt like a ritual of liberation. The number appeared, 37,426. The total value of the Anderson Family Fund, a honeypot everyone dipped into without hesitation. Of that, $4.2 million was my original capital, plus over $1.7 million in profits marked as reinvested. Nearly $6 million, my sweat, tears, and intellect, but in their eyes, just shared wealth. I hovered the cursor over the withdraw button. My heart pounded like a war drum. A voice in my head whispered, "Are you sure? This is your family." I gave a bitter laugh, muttering to myself, "Family? If this is how they define family, I'm returning the word." I clicked. The system prompted a confirmation. "Are you sure you want to proceed with this transaction?" I typed, "Yes." 3 confirmations, 3 keystrokes, 3 resolute decisions, and it was done. In minutes, nearly $6 million transferred to my personal account, and the Anderson Family Fund was frozen pending verification, a standard bank procedure for any withdrawal over $50,000. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd only exercised my legal right. My phone started buzzing immediately. First, 1 call from my father, then 2, then 3. Within 10 minutes, the missed call list was so long the screen glowed like a flashlight. I let it ring silently, leaning back in my chair, sipping red wine. Strangely, instead of fear, I felt an odd calm. Perhaps that's the difference between the passive and the proactive. One scrambles to keep up, while the other sits back and observes. By 11 p.m., I had over 80 missed calls. Messages flooded the family WhatsApp group. "Rachel, what's going on? Are you trying to ruin us? Call me back immediately. That's an order. You have no right to do this, Rachel. This is the family fund." I guessed that one was from Patricia. I just smiled and set the phone face down. I remembered the meetings where my ideas were cut off, stolen outright, while I bit my lip to keep from crying. Tonight, all that frustration poured into a single click. My silence was no longer weakness. It was a weapon. I muted notifications, played soft jazz, and let Boston's city lights stream through the window. In their glow, I saw my reflection. No longer the one pushed to the sidelines, but the one rewriting the rules. Don't misunderstand. I didn't gloat when I withdrew the funds. I felt liberated. A strange relief, as if I'd finally shed the invisible chains they'd bound me with for years. If they thought I'd stay silent for the sake of family, they mistook kinship for exploitation. At nearly 2 a.m., I stepped onto the balcony, the cold wind biting but refreshing. My phone kept buzzing, now with voicemail alerts. I imagined they contained every tone, anger, threats, maybe even pleas. But I didn't listen, not yet. Tonight, I just wanted to savor a feeling I'd waited too long for. Freedom. I knew that come morning when they realized the fund was frozen, a real storm would erupt. They'd hold an emergency meeting, scheme, call lawyers, maybe even threaten to sue me. But this time I wasn't afraid. I had the truth, the law, and most importantly, myself. The Anderson family always saw me as a dispensable pawn. But that pawn, when it reached the end of the board, became a queen. And no one underestimates a queen. You see, a single decision in a few minutes can shake an empire built over 3 generations. And I, Rachel Anderson, chose that night to kill off my role as the passive one. The next morning, I didn't wake to birds or street noise as usual. The first thing that roused me was my phone's incessant ringing. The screen glowed with an endless stream of notifications. In the family WhatsApp group, messages were flying. "Rachel, what the hell are you doing?" My father, starting with his usual anger. This is irresponsible. The whole family's capital is stuck, and it's your fault. Patricia, naturally. Call me now, we can sort this out. You're ruining your future by pulling this stunt. Uncle Richard, mixing threats with persuasion. Rachel, you're so selfish. Do you know the Henderson deal is about to collapse? Jake, always framing it around his own losses. I scrolled through, sipping black coffee, gliding past their accusations with an odd calm. What they called blazing anger felt like stray sparks landing in a storm I'd already prepared for. Some messages shifted tone, as if they'd rehearsed a script. Sweetheart, I know you're upset. Don't let emotions ruin your career. Return the money and we'll sort it out. My father moving from anger to pleading. Rachel, darling, I only want what's best for you. Put the money back and we'll talk as a family. Patricia, her honeyed tone hiding claws. Sis, Jake was right. You're destroying everything. Think again before it's too late. A distant cousin who never cared about me, now suddenly a counselor. I laughed. It was miraculous how overnight I'd gone from annoying niece to the most powerful figure in their conversations. But amid the flood of messages, one stood out. Short, no blame, no accusations, no fake concern. You did the right thing. Coffee? It was from Amanda, my cousin. I paused, rereading it. In the chaos of their accusations, her message was like a cool drop in a desert. Amanda was always the quietest in the family. If you've seen my video about the Anderson women, you'll know. While I was dismissed for being too smart, Amanda was sidelined for not being useful enough to the company. She studied architecture, irrelevant to finance, so she was stuck doing marketing for Anderson Financial like a shadow. We weren't close, but between two women oppressed in a male-dominated, power-hungry family, there was an unspoken bond. Her message, brief, simple, was proof I wasn't entirely alone. I replied, coffee at 3 p.m., usual spot. And for the first time in months, my heart felt lighter. While waiting for our meeting, I read through more family messages. They cycled through every emotion: anger, pleading, threats. If you don't return the money, we'll sue. The bank won't let you get away with this, Rachel. You'll lose all your clients when they hear you turned against your family. I smiled faintly, shaking my head. If they thought these threats would scare me, they'd underestimated me again. I'd planned for everything: assets in my name, tightly protected patents, clients bound by personal contracts. I didn't just withdraw funds, I'd built a fortress. At 3 p.m., I met Amanda at a small cafe in Beacon Hill. Unlike the family's usual opulence, this place was simple, quiet. Amanda walked in, her face tense but her eyes resolute. You know, she said after ordering a cappuccino, I read the family's messages and wanted to scream, but when I saw yours, I was happy. Finally, someone dared to do what they fear most. I looked at her, replying slowly. They fear the truth. They fear that the woman they dismissed is the one creating the most value. Amanda gave a bitter smile. They've spent their lives building power by putting women down. I'm glad you stopped taking it. You gave them a slap they'll never forget. We sat in silence for a moment, the soft jazz filling the air. In that moment, I realized my rebellion wasn't just for me, it was for Amanda, for everyone pushed to the margins for not fitting the family's mold. That evening, back home, I reopened the family chat. Messages were still pouring in. But I didn't respond. I sent just one line. I'll talk when I'm ready. For now, get used to the fund being frozen. Then I turned off my phone and leaned back on the sofa. In the quiet house, I heard my heartbeat, not from fear, but from excitement. I knew this was just the opening act. The real storm was still coming. If you were in my shoes, pelted with stones from your family, but offered a rare spark of understanding from one person, what would you do? Would you step back or keep moving forward no matter what? If this story resonates, comment Y. If not, comment N. That evening, after coffee with Amanda, I returned to my brownstone. Boston's air was chilly, late autumn winds slipping through the door cracks. I opened my office, filled with files, books, and old family photos. The desk lamp cast a small glow on a framed picture of my grandfather on the bookshelf. I picked it up, brushing the thin layer of dust off the glass. His image was unchanged. A classic pinstripe suit, sharp yet warm eyes, a smile both stern and kind. He passed when I was 17, but his words still echoed in my ears. Suddenly, I noticed the frame's back was thicker than usual. I pried open the wood, and a yellowed envelope slipped out, falling to the floor. My heart tightened. The neat handwriting read, "To Rachel." My hands trembled as I tore the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, its paper aged by time. "Rachel, if you're reading this, you're mature enough to understand. The best legacy isn't money, but the opportunities you give others. Anderson Financial isn't just for enriching the family, it's for proving we can use our intellect to uplift the community. If the family forgets this, it's your duty to remind them." I paused, taking a deep breath. My eyes blurred, whether from the lamp's glare or overwhelming emotion. My grandfather saw me. He knew I'd be the one strong enough to preserve the company's true spirit. Inside the envelope was an unopened codicil to his will. I carefully unfolded it. Supplemental clause. Allocate a portion of profits from new investment strategies, including Rachel's proposed models, to establish the Anderson Scholarship Fund. This fund will support talented low-income students in finance and science, giving them a chance to rise. The fund will be independently managed, but requires at least one family member's co-signature for validation. I read it again and again. Tears rolled down my cheeks, not from weakness, but from finally finding the spiritual support I thought I'd lost. I remembered being 14, sitting with my grandfather on the summer porch. I'd shared my idea that the company should allocate profits to help poor students, believing they were the future. My father laughed, mocking, "Dreamy girl, the company's for making money, not charity." But my grandfather listened, nodded, and said, "Hold on to that idea. One day, it'll matter more than you think." I never imagined he'd written it down, making it an official part of his will. That night, alone in my room, the letter on my desk beside my open laptop, I laughed bitterly, imagining my father and Patricia screaming in the group chat about financial losses, while my grandfather left a timeless message. "Money is a tool, but opportunity is the legacy." I whispered, "Grandpa, I promise I'll do it right. I'll make this clause a reality, even if the whole family fights me." My phone buzzed again. I glanced at the messages. "Rachel, do you know we're about to lose the Henderson deal? If you don't return the money, we'll sue. The family raised you and now you stab us in the back?" I didn't reply. Tonight, I wasn't the trembling daughter afraid of rejection. I was the one holding both financial power and the spirit of the legacy. I opened a new file on my computer, titled Anderson Scholarship Fund, Restart Plan. My fingers flew across the keyboard, each line a declaration. I wouldn't just save the company with money, but restore the family's honor with what my grandfather wanted. A question echoed in my mind. How do I get them to co-sign? Not because I needed their approval, but because making this a shared project would make it harder for them to deny my worth. This wasn't just revenge, it was redefining Anderson Financial. In the lit room, I felt my grandfather's presence, as if he stood behind me, hand on my shoulder. "You're not alone." I smiled, folded the letter, and locked it in the safe. Tonight, I didn't just hold financial secrets, I held the soul of the family. And you know what? Financial power can intimidate, but spiritual strength makes people bow. I had both. I chose to hold the meeting at my Back Bay brownstone, the house no one in the family knew I owned. They thought I lived in a modest apartment, drove an old sedan, and lived frugally like a girl who hasn't made it. They had no idea that behind my simple facade, I'd built my own empire. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened the door. There stood my father, Uncle Richard, Aunt Patricia, Jake, and the family lawyer. They looked around, their eyes betraying surprise. Original paintings on the walls, walnut furniture, light streaming through large windows, it all unsettled them. Patricia blurted, "Rachel, are you renting this place?" I smiled. No, Aunt Patricia. This is my home. Please, come in. In that moment, I saw it clearly. For the first time, they felt the power shift. I led them to the dining room, where a long table was set with chairs neatly aligned and documents placed at each seat. I stood at the head, the spot my father had monopolized for years. He frowned but said nothing. He knew this was my turf. I began. Thank you for coming. Before we discuss the Henderson deal or the family fund, I want to clarify some things. Things you've never known. I clicked a remote, and a large screen lit up with the logo, Rachel Anderson Capital. The room froze. Jake raised an eyebrow. Patricia's jaw dropped slightly, and my father's hand trembled, though he tried to stay composed. I continued, my voice steady but firm. For the past 8 years, alongside working for Anderson Financial, I've built my own investment firm. It currently manages over $400 million in client assets, with an average annual return of 17%. Murmurs erupted. Uncle Richard scoffed. No way! If you're that busy, where'd you find the time? I cut him off, still smiling. Evenings, weekends, and the vacations you all spent in the Hamptons. While others relaxed, I worked. I moved to the next slide, a list of 17 current Anderson Financial clients with clauses allowing them to follow me if I left. Faces around the table paled. These are contracts, all legal, I said, placing a thick folder on the table. If I leave, at least $230 million goes with me. Jake's face flushed, his voice cracking. This is betrayal. I locked eyes with him. No, it's respecting clients. They want to follow the person who works directly with them, not someone coasting on their efforts. I clicked to another slide. Patents for 7 financial algorithms in my name. Certificates flashed on the screen, their red legal seals like daggers cutting through their illusions. My father tried to stay calm. Rachel, those algorithms, you developed them while working for the company. They belong to Anderson Financial. I slid another folder forward. You can check. All were developed off hours, with my own resources, verified by lawyers. You can ask the lawyer sitting here. The family lawyer nodded reluctantly. Legally, they belong to Ms. Rachel. The room's air thickened. The faces once confident in controlling me shrank before undeniable evidence. I crossed my arms, leaning forward. Now you understand. When the WhatsApp group said Rachel should step away, I did. I stepped away with my assets, clients, and technology. Can Anderson Financial survive without me? Answer that yourselves. A heavy silence enveloped the room. Patricia broke it first, her voice trembling but still sarcastic. You planned to betray us all along? I gave a soft laugh, dripping with irony. No, Aunt Patricia, I planned to protect myself, knowing I'd be betrayed. Jake slammed the table. You have no right to ruin this family. I turned to him, my eyes cold. This family doesn't need me to ruin it. It's been rotting on its own for years. My father, silent until now, finally spoke. He looked at me, his eyes a mix of anger and helplessness. Rachel, what do you want? I shrugged. I want respect. I want my voice to matter equally. And most importantly, I want Anderson Financial to remember the true purpose my grandfather left behind. I placed my grandfather's letter on the table. The room stared, stunned. This is a codicil to his will. It includes a clause to establish the Anderson Scholarship Fund. If you all agree to sign, we'll restart it using profits from the Henderson deal. I saw their eyes waver. Though no one said it, the truth was clear. I held not just financial power, but the spirit of the legacy. And for the first time, I sat at the head of the table, watching my family listen in silence. That seat no longer belonged to my father. I leaned back, my voice soft but challenging. So, let's be honest. Where will Anderson Financial go? Down the old path or the new one my grandfather wanted? I'm ready to hear your answer. They sat in silence, their faces heavy, but I knew. From today, the game had changed. After I placed my grandfather's letter on the table, the room sank into a tense silence. Everyone looked down, avoiding my gaze, as if a truth had been forced into the open. But Uncle Richard broke the quiet with a hoarse voice. The Henderson deal will collapse without enough capital. We need $3 million in 2 days. Otherwise, we lose everything. The room snapped to attention. Jake jumped in. See? You caused this, Rachel. If you hadn't withdrawn, we'd be fine. Now what? I looked at him, a faint smirk on my lips. You can blame me, but the reality is, Henderson's falling apart, and this family needs me more than ever. My father cleared his throat, trying to maintain his fading authority. Rachel, you know this is a critical moment. If Henderson fails, the family's reputation is done. Do you have a solution? I leaned back, arms crossed, voice calm. Yes, I'm ready to inject $5 million into the fund by tomorrow morning. Enough to save Henderson, with some to spare. But I paused, scanning their faces. They held their breath. It won't be a contribution. It'll be a personal loan from me, at market interest rates, with a fully binding legal contract. The air froze. What? Patricia nearly shouted. You're charging interest to your own family? I replied coolly. No, you're mistaken. I'm applying the principle you all taught me. In business, there's no room for sentiment. This is business. Jake slammed the table. This is extortion. I chuckled, the sound making him flush. No, Jake. This is negotiation. If you want another term, use the right one. My father stared at me, anger mixed with helplessness. He knew better than anyone. Without my offer, Henderson was doomed, and he knew I had the money and the legal standing to do this. Terms? He asked, voice low. I pulled a draft contract from my folder and placed it on the table. A $5 million loan, 6% annual interest, 24-month term. Anderson Financial signs as a legal entity, with lawyer oversight. If breached, I can reclaim the capital plus a 10% penalty. The room nearly exploded. Uncle Richard gritted his teeth. This is absurd. A family needing legal contracts? I looked at him. This family kicked me out with a WhatsApp message. Don't talk to me about loyalty. A long silence followed. They knew I was right. Finally, my father nodded slowly. Fine, we'll sign. Jonathan, draft the contract. The lawyer nodded, opening his laptop. Jake stood, shouting, Dad, no way! How can we let her strong-arm us like this? My father cut him off. Enough, Jake, don't you get it? We have no choice. I watched the scene, a strange mix of coldness and satisfaction rising within me. For years they'd interrupted me, stolen my work, mocked me as theoretical. Now they were signing a contract I dictated, and I realized true power isn't about sitting at the head of the table, it's about controlling the money. Patricia, after sitting silently, switched to a whiny tone. Rachel, are you sure you have to be so harsh? We're women in this family, we should support each other. You could waive the interest, as a favor. I cut her off, voice laced with sarcasm. Aunt Patricia, did you forget? You liked the message telling me to step away. Now you want me to waive interest? Sorry, I don't do charity in business. Her face paled. I glanced at Amanda, the only one smiling faintly. I knew at least one person in the room understood why I did this. As the lawyer reviewed the contract, I saw my father's hand tremble as he signed. He was used to his daughter being a shadow. Now he had to acknowledge me as his creditor. A bitter role reversal. The contract was signed. I stood, voice clear. It's done. The money will transfer tomorrow morning. Henderson is safe. But remember, from now on, I'm not in the background. I'm an independent force. No one responded. They either looked down or avoided my eyes. That evening, after they left, I sat alone in the living room, the contract still on the table. I sipped wine, smiling faintly. Finally, I'd proven I wasn't a shadow. The air was still heavy after they reluctantly signed the $5 million loan contract. My father was still bitter, Patricia sat with crossed legs, trying to appear calm. Jake fidgeted as if he wanted to burn the documents. I knew the moment was ripe. I placed a pale yellow envelope on the table. Their faces flickered with surprise, then tightened. "What's this now?" Richard grumbled. I looked at my father, speaking slowly. "This is a letter from Grandpa. He left it for me alone. It contains something we've all forgotten." I opened the envelope, pulling out the time-yellowed letter. My voice rang out, steady but trembling with emotion. "Rachel, if you're reading this, you're mature enough to understand. The best legacy isn't money, but the opportunities you give others." The room was silent. Patricia's glaring eyes softened. My father frowned slightly, and Jake gave a nervous smirk, but didn't interrupt. I continued. "Anderson Financial isn't just for enriching the family, but for proving we can use our intellect to uplift the community. If the family forgets this, it's your duty to remind them." I looked up, letting the words sink into the thick silence. The tension was palpable. I could hear the clock ticking. Their eyes held disbelief, shock, even a hint of shame. Jake broke first. "This letter, who verified it? We don't know when Grandpa wrote it." I placed the codicil on the table, its red legal seal like a dagger. "This is an official codicil to his will. He had it notarized, and I found the copy he sent me. It includes a clause to establish the Anderson Scholarship Fund, using profits from my proposed strategies." The room erupted in murmurs. My father picked up the codicil, his eyes scanning quickly before stopping at the line requiring a family member's co-signature. "Good Lord," he whispered. His voice lacked authority, sounding like a man who'd just rediscovered a long-forgotten legacy. Patricia reacted instantly. "But Rachel, we're not flush with cash. The money's for the company, not to scatter on poor students." I looked at her, my smile bitter. "Aunt Patricia, Grandpa called it opportunity. You call it scattering money. That's the difference between vision and selfishness." She fell silent, her face flushed. I took a deep breath, scanning the table. "The Henderson deal will bring massive profits, and I've decided a portion will go directly to restarting the Anderson Scholarship Fund. This isn't a request, it's a statement. I'm following Grandpa's wishes." The room exploded in protests. "No way!" Jake slammed the table. "Rachel, you're going too far," my father growled. "You're turning the company into a charity?" Richard snarled. I stood tall, my voice like steel. "No, I'm turning it into something meaningful. And if that bothers you, I'm sorry. Grandpa chose me to do this, not you." In that moment, I saw them shrink, like an army once thought invincible, now stripped of weapons and spirit. My father sighed, placing a hand on the letter. "I never heard Dad talk about this." I looked at him, calm. "You didn't hear because you never listened." He froze, his eyes wavering. For the first time, he had to face the truth. He'd overlooked his own father's spiritual legacy. Amanda, silent until now, spoke up. Her voice was soft but firm. "I support Rachel. If this fund is established, I'll be the first to co-sign. Grandpa wanted this, and I believe he was right." Everyone turned to Amanda, stunned. She was never taken seriously in meetings, but today, her agreement was like a crack in the dam. My father sighed, as if releasing a burden. "Fine, I'll sign. Not for you, Rachel, but for my father." I smiled. "I don't need you to sign for me, just sign for Grandpa." One by one, they signed. My father, his handwriting firm but shaky. Richard, reluctantly, as if forced to hold the pen. Patricia, her face composed but eyes flashing with resentment. Jake, he signed so fast it was like he wanted to rip the paper. Finally, the Anderson Scholarship Fund charter bore everyone's signatures. I held the paper, feeling its weight beyond millions in numbers. It was the first sign of unity, however reluctant. I looked up at the room. "This is done. We've created a moment history will remember. For the first time in years, we're not fighting over shares but coming together to build a legacy." No one replied. But in their eyes, I saw a strange mix: anger, acceptance, and a hint of relief. Amanda smiled at me, small but warm. In that moment, I knew I wasn't fighting alone anymore. After they left, I sat alone in the quiet room. The charter lay on the table, their signatures like scars from a battle just fought. I knew this wasn't lasting peace, just a temporary truce, but it proved that even the Anderson family could unite when pushed to the wall. I sipped wine, smiling faintly. Grandpa, I finally got them to do what you wanted. The Henderson deal, the nightmare the family dreaded, closed with results beyond expectation. Thanks to my $5 million loan, the contract was signed smoothly, and in the first quarter, net profits exceeded forecasts, hitting nearly $3.2 million. The family sighed in relief, as if dodging a fatal blow. The irony? No one mentioned that without me, the deal would have died in its cradle. They talked about wise strategies, long-term vision, even praised each other for uniting in crisis. I sat quietly, sipping tea, smiling inwardly. Sometimes the truth doesn't need arguing, it stands tall, making them squirm when they meet my eyes. But Henderson was just the start. The real blow to their pride came from the Anderson Scholarship Fund. At the first awards ceremony, I stood on a University Hall stage in Boston. The front row held young students, some in worn-out clothes, their eyes shy yet eager. Behind them were the press, cameras, and of course my family in the VIP seats, forcing awkward smiles under the flashing lights. I looked at my prepared speech but folded it. I didn't need flowery words. I spoke plainly, my voice calm but resonant. My grandfather wrote, "The best legacy isn't money, but the opportunities you give others." Today, we turn those words into action. The Anderson Scholarship Fund will support talented students, regardless of background, to do what this world needs: create new value. The hall erupted in applause. I caught my father blinking, as if swallowing a hard truth. His daughter was being celebrated, not for the Anderson wealth, but for our willingness to share it. The next day, the press was abuzz. The Boston Globe headlined, "Anderson Financial, not just wealth, but opportunity." A finance magazine commented, "Perhaps Anderson's innovation comes not from the patriarchs, but from the daughter once overlooked." I laughed reading that. The press said what I didn't need to shout in meetings. My worth could no longer be hidden. That evening, at my father's house, the mood was different. Instead of jabs or sarcasm, there was an unusual silence, like they'd just lost a battle they didn't want to admit. My father stood, poured a glass of wine, and approached me. He looked at me so long, I felt uneasy. Then he nodded, his voice warm in a rare way. "I forgot my father's lesson. You reminded me." I froze. For the first time in years, he didn't dismiss, criticize, or lecture. He acknowledged me. I replied softly but firmly, "I didn't do it for you. I did it for Grandpa. But if you see it today, I'm glad." His eyes softened, no longer father-to-daughter authority, but mutual respect. A strange feeling, like a stone lifting from my chest. Of course, not all wounds healed instantly. Patricia still whispered to Richard that I was manipulating the media. Jake muttered about my lucky break. But I didn't need their love. I just needed them unable to deny me. And in my father's eyes, I saw what I'd waited 32 years for: recognition. That night, back at my brownstone, I sat by the window, city lights shimmering. I thought of my grandfather. If he were alive, he wouldn't be surprised. He believed in me from the start. The rest of the family didn't. I whispered, "Grandpa, I finally got them on your path." Pride mixed with calm filled me. I knew this wasn't the end. I'd won a battle, but the war in the Anderson family was far from over. People often ask, how does it feel to finally be recognized by your family? The answer is simple. I feel relieved, but not victorious. Because in the end, what I found wasn't personal glory, but a deeper truth. A legacy isn't what you hold tight, but what you leave for others. Looking back, every chapter, every shard came together into a complete picture. From that Friday afternoon, when the WhatsApp group cast me out with a cold message, from the quarterly meeting where my 14% return was buried under mocking laughter, from the night I clicked to withdraw my capital, sending the family into chaos, to the moment I revealed my secret, my own company, my own clients, my patented algorithms. And finally, my grandfather's letter, the priceless gift that turned a financial battle into a humane journey. All those pieces, placed together, painted a woman stepping from darkness into light, from being dismissed to taking control. The path wasn't paved with roses. I swallowed tears in meetings, endured Patricia's sarcasm, Jake's blatant jealousy, and my father's coldness. But when the Anderson Scholarship Fund awarded its first grant to a poor student, I understood. Every wound had a purpose. I remember that student's eyes, shy yet sparkling. He said, "Without this scholarship, I'd have dropped out. Now I can pursue finance, and one day, I want to be a mentor like you." I smiled. Never had I felt I was truly carrying my grandfather's legacy like in that moment. My father changed too, slowly and heavily. One evening, after the scholarship announcement, he visited my private office. His eyes weren't commanding, but tired and sincere. "Rachel," he said, "I was wrong. I was so focused on holding power that I forgot the real meaning. You reminded me of my father's lesson." I paused, then replied, "I didn't need your acknowledgement. I needed you to understand, because a legacy isn't for one generation, it's for those that follow." His eyes softened, and for the first time, he nodded to me as an equal. I learned one thing: respect is necessary, but it's not the destination. Respect is just the first step to doing more, opening opportunities for others. Patricia? She still grumbles about my media takeover, but she signed the scholarship fund. Jake's unusually quiet, perhaps plotting his own path. I don't need them to change completely. I just need them unable to stop me. Amanda, the cousin stuck in marketing, boldly applied to an architecture firm. She told me, "You stood up, so I dared to walk my own path." Hearing that, I felt relieved. Sometimes, a single brave act doesn't just free you, it ignites others. That weekend night, I sat in my familiar brownstone room, my grandfather's yellowed letter beside me. I reread his trembling words. "The best legacy isn't money, but the opportunities you give others." I smiled. For years, my family chased money, power, prestige. But my grandfather left the key to freedom long ago. It just took someone to unlock the door. And that someone was me. If you ask if I regret it, the answer is no. I don't regret striking back fiercely, becoming ruthless in their eyes. Because if I hadn't, I'd still be buried in the role of theoretical daughter. But more importantly, I don't regret choosing compassion in the end. I didn't stop at proving myself. I used that victory to create value beyond me. Respect is necessary, but using your worth to open doors for others, that's the eternal legacy. Closing this story, I realized everything I went through, from disdain to retaliation to compassion, led to one lesson. True value isn't in money or power, but in how you use them to create opportunities for others. It took me years to understand that respect is essential, but only by giving opportunities do you leave a meaningful legacy. I believe everyone has moments of being underestimated, overlooked, even cast aside. But what matters isn't what they think of you, it's how you choose to rise. And when you're strong enough to stand, remember to open the door for those behind you. That's how you turn pain into value, wounds into legacy. If this story touched you, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, hit like, and follow the channel for more journeys. Who knows, your story might inspire someone else.